this is all improvised like my music. This, what I am saying is only related to how I feel, like my music, how the music comes out of me. We usually feel that the Indian music takes so much long time for learning. Why it is like this? Because the person who is learning the Indian classical music has got two responsibilities. He has the responsibility of not only knowing about the music, but when he plays it, because the whole nature of the music is improvised, he is the composer at all times, as he plays. So he is a dynamic composer at the time of performing it. So he has two instantaneous responsibilities happening with each other, they're complementing with each other. So knowing about the music is easier to learn because you have references. But to be able to compose, you must have the feeling that the music is already imbibing in your heart. Like there are notes of a rag. And you can easily learn the notes of a rag. There are hundreds and hundreds of books available. There are books with compositions. You can read that, learn the rag. But once you have learned how the rag moves, how you move in the rag, that is, then there is an essence, there is an atmosphere building up due to the nature of the rag. It is important for the artist or whoever is learning that to absorb the feeling the notes give into you. This is something that is quite undefinable. You cannot define it. It's a matter of feeling. So the rag gives the notes of the rag, and the way you move in those notes, they give you a feeling. And this is the input one must absorb and digest before he is able to become creative. This process is the long one. Because the moment you start the rag, you can get a dim feeling, but the crystallization doesn't happen quickly. You have to be familiar with the rag. You have to involve yourself with great frequency, give lot of time, do lot of practice. And as with the support of your teacher who is helping you, and because he is obviously going to be more experienced in experiencing the nature of the rag, so you take his support, and when he explains that this is, if he is able to explain the flow of feelings, how the rag's notes are developing the feeling, and it goes into your soul, you can say. That defines it more correctly. Then, when you start reflecting on the feelings that the rag over years that you have absorbed, it has made you feel that the moment these notes come, I get this kind of feeling. You have become habituated in experiencing that feeling. Then you will find those feelings, if your practice has remained good on the instrument during the whole period, the feelings will flow out of you unobstructedly. Then is the first stepping stone for you in Indian classical music to become a musician. Generally, you will find that people often say, I am spending 6 hours, 8 hours, 10 hours practicing, and not a lot of music is coming out of my hands. I find it dry, sometimes very boring. You see, the practice part has to be made interesting. This is initially the teacher's responsibility to teach the student in such a way that the practice does not become boring, and also to teach the student how to create practices for himself, so that a part of his creative mind is also activated during his own practice. So the student becomes well versed in not only practicing but making his own exercises in such a nice way that he can keep the practice exciting, not boring. Because that excitement will cause him to practice more. So his own drive and desire to practice more, which is a requisite, is not out of sheer pressure, but out of desire, then the results are much better. What I said about the practice being many hours and you don't feel the result, your whole output towards this practice, which earlier I said that after your practice is very good, then is your first stepping stone, first step towards becoming an artist. So you have to have a very good practice, because it's the practice which we call the riyaz is like a tool. Once you have the right tool for the right work, then you can proceed very well to do the work successfully. But if your tool is faulty and you still have to do that work, then you would try to do the work. Perhaps you might succeed, but in a very coarse way. This is the biggest pitfall that we have in our music, that we are often not able to keep up the practice to that level and degree where the reflection that you have, like you say that there is, the feeling of the music is already there in your inside. That is wonderful. But at the same time, that feeling has to come out of your fingers, because that is the practical demonstration of your feelings. This is a reflection of your insides. Your hands on the instrument are the real reflections which another person can listen, hear and understand and enjoy. So that reflection can happen very well when your practice is flawless. Like the moment it is occurring in your mind that yes, this desire is coming, I want to do the phrase in this way, the hands should immediately be able to carry it out. They should not cause obstruction to the flow of the nature of the music. This is what I mean by absorption of the essence of our music. Unless that essence is absorbed, doing Indian classical music in a mechanical way makes the music very boring.
What is the speciality of the Imdad Khani Gharana?
My Gharana, as far as I am concerned, is limited to my father, Pandit Mukherjee, from whom I learned. He learned from disciples of Ustad Inayat Khan, who was the son of Imdad Khan. And so actually Imdad Khan is given credit, and that he was the innovator of a very special way of playing the sitar, which dealt upon the voice, the singing style. And given the factor that in those days, I mean when Imdad Khan was there, it was just about 1900, in the year 1900, before that 1890. We had, sitar strings were very poor in quality. Very, very poor in quality. You could not pull much and all that. So many problems. They were technically deficient. And in spite of those difficulties, the nature of the singing, we call it gayan. Gana means to sing. And gaiki means of the way of singing. So he started expressing this way of singing, way of the voice, through the sitar. So this technique came from him. And so I have actually, basically it is me who has named this Gharana as Imdad Khani Gharana, giving due credit to the correct maestro, the first maestro who started this thought process. Because he is the thinker. So you have always to give credit to the first person who thinks in that way.
Tell us about your father. What does guru mean? What does it mean if your father is your guru?
Guru means basically the teacher. The word guru means teacher. And here in our Indian classical music, it is just not related to two persons interacting, one person as a teacher interacting for a short while with the student in a few hours, and that's it. It's not like that. Because of the nature of the music, it involves a lot of self-analysis of a person. And our Indian classical music is related to the expression of human feelings in a very crystal clear way. For that, one has to recognize one's inner self, and that is not a very easy job. So there was the system of the Guru Shishya Parampara, where the student became like a part of the teacher's family and remained in a Gurukul. The teachers, where the students remained together and stayed often with the teacher for 10 years, 12 years, 15 years. And not only the music, but the personality and the help from the teacher to assess the student's own personality occurred during this long period, and the student underwent the ability to absorb the thinking process of the teacher. So, like in my case, I was very lucky to have my teacher in my father. So for me, I also had the Gurukul system. Luckily, my teacher was my father, so I was staying with him. But this is not always the case. Many people are not so lucky. They have to come to their teachers. God knows where the teacher would be, in which part of the country, or in which part of the world for that matter. And they would have to spend months, years, perhaps decades learning the music, learning the essence, learning to realize how the music is getting absorbed in their own being, and then to be able to reflect on it. Because our classical music is completely improvised. It is having tremendous freedom within the boundaries of the rag, which is the musical boundary of that particular musical feeling. So learning to absorb the feelings is the time-taking process, and you need the proximity of your teacher, a close proximity, so that there are so many aspects in it that you need it's like the continuity of our music. If you break the continuity, the music will cease to have a pleasant identity. So the learning process of this is also like the continuity that the music needs. So to maintain continuity, you have to have this process. That's why it often, for a man to become an artist, it has often taken 15, 20 years before his thinking process developed an identity of its own, and then started expressing his own music. That's what makes learning Indian classical music such a time-taking and difficult process. As I was saying, that I was so lucky to have my father as my teacher, which gave me the facility of the Gurukul system. I grew up in my father's home, in his proximity. So in the process, I grew up in my teacher's proximity. From the age of 5, my father had handed me a small sitar, because sitar was my father's main instrument, and he played many instruments, sarod, veena, esraj, but sitar was his first love. And so he gave me a small sitar to play, which was about a little bigger than half the size of a regular sitar, because a 5-year-old, how much size of sitar he can hold. So in the beginning, I used to be taught, he taught me a small composition right at the beginning, a very small composition, 2-3 lines, and I was fortunately able to absorb it quickly, and what he did in the beginning was such a unique process. Now I realize. He didn't start teaching me the notes in a dry, boring way. He taught me, the first thing he taught me was a composition. A composition has an identity. It is having a moving musical image. So I liked it. The moment I liked it, my desire to play it happened automatically. If, God forbid, at that moment something had happened which would make playing the sitar uninteresting or boring, then my drive for wanting to play the sitar would not have happened. This is the first wise thing a teacher does, at least in our system of playing. So as a result, I found that even as a kid, I didn't understand anything what I was doing, but I enjoyed making those sounds. So that was the first seed of musical growth that my father planted in my mind. And it grew and grew and grew.
I saw pictures of you playing different instruments, like veena, sarod, sarangi as well. Why did you choose the sitar?
The sitar happened to be the instrument with which I was most in contact. And the first instrument I touched, my basic practice has always been with the sitar. My father was basically a sitar player. It is a thought process. A sitar player's son is handed the sitar. It is expected that because he is growing up in that environment, listening to that instrument, his familiarity with that instrument is a natural phenomenon. So with this expectation, I was given the sitar. And I have this belief that I haven't let him down. But as I said, my father plays many other instruments also. So we have a room full of different instruments at home. Many instruments in my father's home in Bhilai. We have a whole music room full of different instruments. So sometimes my father used to tell me, okay, try playing the sarod, try playing this. But you don't see me holding those instruments as a child. So that is the thing. So by then my identity with the sitar had solidified. So I was able to handle a stringed instrument. And once you are able to handle one stringed instrument rather well, then the possibility of your handling other stringed instruments is not that difficult. So out of, like you can say, out of hobby or just a little bit of variety in desire, I tried playing those instruments, and of course I cannot say that I did them professionally well, but like the sitar. But I enjoyed playing them.
When did you first perform publicly?
I was 13 years old then, and I had gone along with my father to a place called Jabalpur in central India. So the concert was my father's concert actually. He had been invited to play in one well-known music festival there. So I was sitting in the back. I had taken my sitar also. So just a few twangs along with my father. He was basically the main artist. So I was just sort of giving little accompaniment in some spots. So it happened that the audience felt that they would like to hear me separately. So the next day after my father's recital, I was given 10 minutes to play. So I played for 12 minutes and I was appreciated. And that gave me a lot of impetus, a lot of good feeling for me to work harder on the sitar. Appreciation always helps to generate good feelings towards that kind of work.
You have some names like Sitarist of the Century or King of the Dance. What do you think about these?
Yeah, they have been, there have been very many kind people who have liked my sitar playing with the grace of God, as we always say. and they have very kindly felt or expressed their feelings in words like this. But the more such appreciation we get, the more is the realization of the greater responsibility the music has heaped upon me. That once such kind words have graced my sitar playing, I cannot afford to take my sitar playing easy. I have to work more to become even better, so that the words of these great and kind persons are supported for all time in future by my improved and more improved music.
Does your music today directly or indirectly reflect any of your respected musicians' musical influences? Who did you listen to in your childhood?
When I was very young, I heard Mustaq Ali Khan. I also heard Ravi Shankar ji. I heard Vilayat Khan. And of course, the Vilayat Khan is the son of Inayat Khan, from whom my father also learned for a while. Of course, that was for a very short time, and because Inayat Khan expired at a very young age. So, since my father learned from Inayat Khan, then he learned from the disciples of Inayat Khan. So obviously, I followed that school of thought, that gharana as we call it. And in that gharana, Vilayat Khan is the greatest sitar player. He has taken the image of this music to great heights, tremendous heights. And obviously I liked his sitar playing very much. But just liking is not enough. The liking is good for allowing the input. But for that input to happen, you need the teacher. For that input to happen, you can listen to something wonderful, enjoy it. And when the mind is not very mature, I mean, how much maturity can you expect from a very young man? So, that young man needs some kind of help to be able to absorb that music better. So, here comes the part my teacher played, my father. Because he is also of the same gharana, and his maturity, of course, was obviously much more than mine. So he helped me absorb, he helped me analyze my likings, and he taught me the processes by which I could play the nuances of that gharana much more easily. So the entire credit is his, my father's. For me, the credit is his, because it is through his teachings that I could find avenues to absorb and then re-exposition my music in the proper image of the gharana.
You have mentioned instrumentalists, but was there any vocalist whose music had any influence on you in your early years?
Yes, I should have included the names. I enjoyed Bade Ghulam Ali Khan. He has always been considered one of the highest and the strongest stalwarts of our classical music tradition. Genius, as I feel that he is. Amir Khan and Omkar Nath Thakur ji. Fantastic artist. Kumar Gandhar ji. The musical personalities of these artists laid the human emotions bare for everybody to experience through their voice. It's an incredible achievement. Their musical expressions were so beautiful and so clear, but it is very difficult to explain in words what is the meaning of saying that the expressions were so beautiful. But they are. It went much above the barrier of languages, and their crystal clear ability to give out their feelings through their music was absorbed by me very happily, perhaps even without knowing. And together they all got digested in my understanding of the music. It's like different hues, colors that you see, and then the hues sometimes mix, and then you reach a particular hue of color which appeals to you the most, and then you re-exposition your thought process in the hue that you like the most, and that will be none of the individuals that you have heard, but a congregation, a coagulation of the whole matter. So today when I play the sitar, all the aspects of these musicians, the different aspects of these musicians, there are parts of it in me, and it's difficult to identify exactly that, this is this person's input, that is that person's input. This is by listening only, but the image is there, and those images help to make my own music more colorful.
You finished your university studies as a metallurgic engineer with excellent results, holding a gold medal. How could you practice enough when you were at university?
I used to complement my studies with the practice, because studies I had to of course do, because engineering was a demanding subject, but there were times when studying, it used to become a little bit tedious. So one needed variety, one needed some kind of relief from the tediousness. So what do people generally do? They go out for a walk, maybe they go watch a movie or something else. So this is a sort of variation from the daily routine. So what I used to do is, instead of doing these, I also used to get bored studying. So I used to take on my practice to give myself variety. So I saved time, I found time rather, to do my practice, which in turn took away from the tediousness of the studies. So complementary, this way I could find time enough to keep myself working in music as well as my studies.
Was there any particular point in your life when you decided to be a musician?
There was not a particular point, because a musician, as my earlier discussion must have given you to understand, that it is a very it has as a profession which you cannot say that okay, I will become a musician. At least in India, you cannot just say I will become a musician and then you become a musician. First of all, it takes about 20 years to even become a creative musician. Then once you have become that musician, it takes another 15 years or 10 years for the person to try to make a credibility in the professional line. So already you see almost 30-35 years in the person's life is gone. So if he starts at 5, he would be nearing somewhere 38-40 years of age before he is an accepted professional. Do you think this is an easy route? Because right from the time when a person is about 24-25 years of age, some people go into a family way, and you have to support a family, and you are expected to earn, and by then you might not have made your name. Then what do you do? So this music as a profession, and to be able to survive entirely on it, is a very difficult proposition. So even I could not say that I will become a musician good enough to be able to survive just on the profession of music. So I did the studies of engineering as a fallback, and both studies went on parallelly, the music and the engineering. And it so happened that I was giving concerts even while I was studying, and these concerts slowly allowed me to become exposed to the musical fraternity in the country, in my country, and I found that they started liking my music. Perhaps there was something in it that they liked, and I started getting invited to perform in festivals. I was still studying at that time. There was a time when I was just about 1 year remaining in my studies, when I found that I was playing in so many concerts that perhaps I would not really need to take engineering as a profession. But then I thought, so many years of studies, must not leave it unfinished. So there was only 1 year remaining. I studied, I got myself a good result. And then, of course, by then, as I said, I was performing in festivals. I thought, let me give myself 2 more years of time. I was then about 22 years. And you can still get a job in India without experience by the age of 25. So I said, I still have 3 years to see whether I can make it as a musician, as a professional musician. And if I can't, then I'll go back to a job. I'll look for a job. But it so happened that I never had to look for a job. That was the time. But it happened in a very gradual way. 2 avenues went parallelly, and when it diverged, I cannot say. But one fine day I found that yes, I did not need to take engineering as a subject, as a means for my livelihood. I was accepted to that degree in my musical line that I could survive on that, I could sustain a family on that. That's how I became a musician.
How did your international career start?
My international career started, the first time I went out of India was in 1979. I was then about 23 years of age. I was invited by our government's cultural department. It's called the Indian Council of Cultural Relations. In 1979, they invited me to go and perform in 4 countries. They were Poland, Bulgaria, Russia and Yugoslavia. There was a big festival in Yugoslavia, so I was representing India in that. So I went and played. This was the beginning of my international career. You will be happy to know that in this Yugoslavian festival there were 37 countries, and India was adjudged as one of the best. 4 countries were adjudged extraordinary. India was one of them. So here I feel good that because my identity is not important, my country's identity is more important. So I didn't let it down. I am very happy about that.
You performed at the House of Commons, London, where you were the first ever musician to perform. How did you get the invitation to the House of Commons?
Yeah. That was a very interesting thing. The House of Commons in London is, of course, a house for politics of the country, their country. And music is so far away from politics. So there was never a thought of, imagination of ever thinking that there could be music in a place like House of Commons, where it is far away from music. But there was one councillor from Leicester who was of Indian origin, and he was for a long time having this opinion that why not have some music. So incidentally in 1990 May, June I was touring the UK. This gentleman came to hear me. Somebody had advised him, why don't you listen to this artist, giving my name. You will find him, I think, rather befitting for the situation. So this had been discussed. I didn't know all about this. I came to know later on. And he came and heard my concert when I had the program in Leicester, and he was sitting in the last row. So we never knew even that MP, as they call. I don't know what they call the political heads of counties there. But he had come, and after the concert he came and congratulated me, and he said that I have this proposal in my mind and we would like you to perform. So I felt very honored that of course it's a matter of honor. that I was being invited to play in the House of Commons. I agreed, and the performance happened. So very nicely organized affair. And after my performance, I came to know that there was never any kind of music that had happened in the House of Commons. And the first music happened was by me. And it was incidental that it was Indian classical music. We must not mistake it that it was the first Indian musician who was playing. I was truly the first musician who ever played there. After that, there have been other musicians who have performed in this series. So the first musician who played in the House of Commons was incidentally an Indian.
Your sitar sound is very different from that of other instruments, even from the sound of the instruments from Indadkhani Gharana. What did you develop on the sitar's body? Is there any specialty that you can share with us? Anything that you have worked out?
Over the last, now it is almost 43 years that I have been in touch with the sitar. Barring aside my small sitar, the sitars that I came into contact from, say, the age of 16. Yeah, at the age of 16 I started handling the normal size instrument. I was having inside me an image of the kind of sound that I liked from a sitar. And I requested, initially my father had 2-3 sitars made for me, and later on I also made requests to sitar makers to make sitars of the type of sound that I liked. But unfortunately, I am a different individual with my likes and dislikes inside me, and the sitar maker is a different person, and it was not possible for me to communicate or for the sitar maker to understand what exactly I meant by the kind of sound that I liked. It was not possible to communicate. It is an impossible communication. So they made me sitars which they said were very, very good. And I took those instruments on the greatest of faith. But 9 times over this long period, I changed my sitars. And I gave many concerts, I had many recordings done, CDs, LPs, cassettes, on these changing instruments. But in none of them I found that I got that warmth of sound which would make my music flower even more beautifully. And I found that time was passing. More than 20 years passed. And I went on changing sitars in the expectation that I might finally get a sitar which has a sound which I like. There was no supply on demand, because the demand nobody could understand. What was the demand? What was the type of sound that I liked? So I finally thought that let me see. What I like, I know. Luckily. What I do not know is how to get that sound, how to make that sound. So why don't I try myself? At the most, I will ruin a few sitars. I have already wasted, say, 22-3 years of the prized time of my life when I was professionally flowering everywhere. I didn't just get the sitar of my likes. So I was quite desperate. That now enough time has passed, enough time has been wasted, but I cannot live a life, a musician's life like this, playing sitars which I do not like, whose sound I do not like. But luckily for me, I at least knew one thing, is what I liked. That was very important. So based on that, I started with the help of a very good worker, a sitar maker, who knew his work very well. I told him that I will take apart sitars and I will make small changes in the designs, in the wooden structures from the inside, and you work for me. He agreed and he worked for me, and he had no responsibilities except to carry out what I wanted him to do. I told him that there is nothing for you to worry. I do not know how the sitar actually is made and what change makes what change in the sound. I do not know this. So I am just going to experiment. But since I am not a carpenter, I needed somebody's help to do the actual work. So this gentleman helped me. And he used to do the work, and I told him that if something goes wrong, it is my responsibility, not your responsibility. Because I am experimenting. So you do not have to worry about things going wrong or whatever. So you just work and you do what I want to be done on the instrument. So work like this, I experimented for almost 4 years on 3 sitars. And I perhaps made all possible mistakes that could possibly make the sitar sound much worse. But in the process I learned what not to do. By working on those parameters of what not to do, I finally made myself this sitar, which I now play, which has the kind of sound that I always wanted. But this sitar, I worked on 3 sitars parallelly. One sitar I used to keep as to work on after the result of my learning, and the other 2 sitars I used to work one in a particular direction. When I learned that a mistake has been made, I have to work in the reverse direction, yet I am not sure whether it's going to improve it to the degree I want or not. So I had the second instrument. So on these 2 instruments I worked in reverse ways. And I learned which is yielding me the right result, how the sound is changing. And the result of my learning through these 2 instruments I worked out on my 3rd instrument. The work on the 3rd instrument, which is the instrument I am playing now, is a result of my learnings of work on the other 2 instruments. This is how I learned. And it was a very tense period for me, these 4 years. Because at that time I was having to play on another instrument. It's one of those 9 instruments. But I was working on this, and then I had the 3rd instrument. At different levels I used to reassemble the instrument. The sitar is an instrument on which if you have to work on the inside, you have to take apart the whole instrument piece by piece. And that itself is a very risky job. So you can imagine, and one cycle of the sitar being ripped apart, worked on and reassembled, and then made playable, it takes, in the weather of Calcutta, it takes almost 3 to 4 months. So you can understand, if I have to take apart the sitar 8-9 times, what a long period of time it must have taken me to be sure that the sitar is reaching the right texture of sound. But over the period, that was one great advantage of this work. I learned that it is possible to make a good sitar. And that is the greatest benefit that I have achieved with this very risky experimentation that I tried on the sitar. And it has yielded me the results. Today I have a sitar which, when I touch, the sound of the sitar completely engulfs me, and I perhaps become a little better musician with this sitar than I could have been with any other sitar.
Tell us about yourself as a guru. How did you start teaching music to your son?
I am still a student, and a student who is still learning. I have very few students, and my main student is my son Budhaditya, and he is learning from me in the same Guru Shishya Parampara which I described earlier. Because of course, father and son, one advantage is that the son is stuck with the father as he grows up in his house, so he gets the musical environment freely. This is a very positive aspect of the whole thing. And my son started his training under my father, that is from his grandfather. And first 6 years he learned from him, and then when we shifted to Calcutta, he has been learning from me from the age of 12 or 13. And through him I started, actually I am slowly learning how to be a teacher, because I have a lot of abilities in playing the instrument well. Doesn't necessarily mean that I might have the similar ability to communicate the essential skills and the process to my student. And only when I have such abilities of communication can I be considered as a teacher. I have very few students, and basically all my abilities of communication I am trying to see whether they yield results. And somehow my son, as my student, seems to have improved tremendously. He is giving his own concerts in India, and this year he will also go to America to give his own concerts by virtue of his own merit. So perhaps as I am teaching him over this long period of 5-6 years that I am teaching him, I am learning slowly to become a teacher. This is about what I think about myself as a teacher.
What do you think about non-Indians who want to learn Indian classical music? We cannot start to play Indian music when we are 5 or even 15. But have you ever heard a non-Indian musician to play correct and charm Indian classical music?
A few, yes. And the important factor when a person of European origin wishes to do well in Indian classical music is to be able to grasp the Indian way of thinking. Because our music relates very directly to the expressions of one's inner self, which is elicited by the notes of the rag. So for this input to happen, you have to have the Indian way of thinking towards the music. So, and of course, the European way of thinking towards the music is obviously bound to be different from the Indian way of thinking. They are different. There are methods and methodologies and processes and styles which are totally different. So if the Indian classical music teacher is able to communicate into his European student the Indian way of thinking towards the music, then the ability of the European student to grow within Indian music will be much faster. Because if you have noticed, one very important factor that I feel is in Indian classical music there is a big world to be explored between any two notes, which we call the mean. The way we flow from one note to the other note. Just consider two consecutive notes. There is an immense world of feelings in the various gradients of continuity that you can create between two notes. Whereas this part, I sometimes am not able to grasp whether it is there in the European way of music. Because in general I have not heard enough European music, but I feel that the two notes are touched as individual points. Sa, re, ga, ma, you go, but sa, re, sa, re, sa, re. This gradient, this is the mean that I am talking about. Does it happen in European music? I am not very conversant. But I don't think so from what little that I have heard. This is a very basic point of change of concept. Because to us, the gradient, the swing between notes has a very big meaning. It is how the heart is giving out its feelings that is conveyed in these means. A lot is conveyed in these means. But if this mean has no meaning to the performer, then it would sound very bad, executed without feeling. So, if the European student can imbibe this Indian way of thinking in his training, then it will help him grasp the essentials in the input of the feelings that the rag gives into a person. Then his ability to perform well in Indian classical music is much more.
Do you feel that the non-Indian Western audience understands and appreciates your music?
It is not possible that we expect that the people from a totally different culture will immediately be able to understand when a foreign music is performed for them. Like in America, Europe, Australia, New Zealand, wherever. If we go and perform our music completely for the first time and people are not conversant with it, it is very difficult. The sudden communication is very difficult to get across. So often it is very useful that in a recital we give a little bit of explanation of how the whole performance will be happening. This is one part of it. And the other part that I have, this is my own personal experience, is if we can take the level of our musical expression to such heights where the boundaries of culture no longer obstruct the flow of feelings, then of course the music will come across to a foreign audience just as well as it comes across to an Indian audience. Because then it is the human emotion which is the same all over the world, which is being activated by the musician's music. But this demands that the musician who is performing is incredibly good. And until that is there, this would not happen. So, I have always based my abilities to communicate on the perfection in my music that I have tried to input. So, based on that, I have always tried to communicate above the boundaries of language and culture. So, there are many times, once I was touring in Australia in 1990. So, I played in many cities where my concert was the first Indian music concert at all. There was never any interaction of any Indian musicians, never. So I had big responsibility. I mean, I just cannot go and play there and just imagine that everybody is going to enjoy. Maybe they enjoy the speed as a variety, but what about the slow parts which are more beautiful? So I had to be extra careful to make sure that I gave each performance as a superb performance. And when I saw the result of this very unique communication, it was a very happy sight to see. People enjoyed it, and they enjoyed it from their hearts. Because when you see a person's expression in the listener's expression, an experienced musician and a good musician who is also able to give the good feelings, there is an ethereal communication. And you can feel that, yes, the music is coming across to the audience. They are enjoying the music, not necessarily understanding the music. If you ask me as a musician who's been in contact with this music for almost 43 years, what I understand about the music while I'm playing it, I have a very difficult time trying to explain that. I feel the music. It is like you walk out in the sunshine and in a very good atmosphere and you feel wonderful. Now just try to put that in words. Just try to understand that good feeling. And I don't think that's possible. Our music, when it is coming out at the superlative level, is just like that. It creates an atmosphere where the listener, the artist, they all become participants to that wonderful atmosphere. And the sunshine is the same for everybody. So is this wonderful music. No language or culture can create a barrier for this wonderful flow of communication. But you have to be a very, very good musician, a very communicative musician to be able to do that.
What are your feelings about recording Indian classical music? The CD's maximum length is 80 minutes only, which is sometimes not enough for one single raga.
So there has to be a lot of editing or lot of, while performing, lot of concising. The artist himself has to make sure that he plays or sings for that length of time which fits on a CD. So there are many factors which are unartistic. So it is often not possible to give one's best on a fixed day in a studio and being told that, you have got this lot of time and you better do your best in this time. It's a very unfair demand on a creative person. A creative person will someday flower magnificently depending on his environment, atmosphere and his mood. But the same creative person sometimes, with the mood and the environment not being 100% conducive to him, might perform a little less than his maximum abilities. And it's very much possible that when you are constraining this creative person with other extraneous parameters of the studio, sometimes you must play this rag only, I want a recording in this rag at this time. So these are all constraints. It's like putting shackles on a person, and a shackled person cannot run freely. So the best way to record Indian classical music is for the recordist to find time, effort and money to move along with an artist on tours to his different concerts. Record him at all the concerts and then choose out of that some of the best recitals, and then you can make some editings that technically today what incredible things are possible, and you fit it on the CD. This would at least make sure of one thing, that really good quality of Indian classical music by that artist is maintained in the CD for posterity, because remember, a CD will last for as long as it is kept safely. It could last for 100 years, 200 years, 500 years. That's what I mean by posterity, for all time in future. And if that music has unfortunately not been good on the day of recording, on the day of the publication, then what remains for posterity is not the best that could have happened. And that's not the best way to preserve music.
How many records of your own do you have?
I am 47 years old. I have 47 records.
Which is your favorite from your records?
First of all, you see, almost out of these, 95% of these, say, records, CDs, cassettes, vinyls, whatever you say, have been recorded by me on sitars which I never really liked. So, the full extent of my abilities on that day could not be exposed. So, this is my thinking about my own music. So, perhaps I cannot say that I am very satisfied with them. But of late, there are, last 5-6 years, the few CDs that have been published, out of that 2 CDs published in Stuttgart by Chandadhara. The music in this I find quite acceptable. And there is a live concert published by Indian Music Club, a recording company in Kansas. The concert was recorded in India. That was quite nice. And of late, Rhyme Records will be publishing, also from Kansas, another live concert. I have heard the prototype of that CD and it is good. So these are the 4 or 5 CDs that I can say that the music on that is not bad.
Have you ever created any ragas? And why does a musician create a raga in your tradition?
I have not created any ragas. I am a tiny infant who is struggling to even identify himself with the existing 7,000 ragas. Imagine there are so many ragas already in creation, already created by stalwarts, and our music is almost 5,000-6,000 years old. It is not a young music. And in so many years, so many genius people have been able to create so many wonderful ragas. It is my opinion that we should first try to go deep in the ragas which have been created by stalwarts who have perhaps had more musical experience than us. Then straight away jump into creating new ragas, and then only to realize after a few years and decades that, oh, this was already created at such a long time, and now what is the use of my creation? So with a stronghold, with a creative inventory of almost 7,000 rags, it's better we should know them all before we start creating something new. As a musician, I would not say I have gone beyond 70 ragas out of these 7,000.
But you have created compositions.
Yes, I have created compositions in the ragas. The ragas were already there, but my own musical expression, sometimes it happens that tremendously feeling-provoking musical phrase comes into the mind at a time which is unpredictable. And to keep that phrase alive, it is a good idea to create a composition which borders and which rolls around that phrase. And so a new composition is born. Not a new rag.
Do you think there is enough of a solid and educated audience to ensure a promising future for classical music in India and in the rest of the world?
Yes, there are enough people who are doing good, youngsters, although it is not something that is a mass popular thing, but there are many youngsters who are doing very well in different fields of Indian classical music, and the growth is there, and I don't see any darkness in the future.
Is there anything else what I haven't asked but you would like to share?
There is a very important aspect that many aspiring musicians, whether in India or elsewhere, that they look towards the music as a mode for name and fame. They don't look towards the music as the source of the pleasure, the source of beauty. And this kind of music needs tremendous dedication. To achieve such beauty, you need tremendous dedication. And if you look towards the music as just as a medium, then you are underrating the level of the art itself, and you are rating yourself more important than the music. This combination never pays. And a person thinking like this would indulge in various forms of self-promotion, which is not doing the music any good, but himself. And his dedication will get diverted. The concentration of his dedication will not be on the music, but it is on himself, and he is only using music as a platform for name and fame. This kind of approach towards music is very unfortunate. We believe in serving the music, and if we do well someday, then the pleasure is in the fact that through us the music has gone, or it has been heightened to a greater height. This is the pleasure. This is the real pleasure. If we completely surrender our identities to the music is the environment, and we are only rendering service in improvement of the level of the music. This thought process creates the desire for being dedicated towards the art, and then one can do well. So if one is looking for quick name and fame through Indian classical music, then that person beware. it doesn't come that easily.